So we are in a teaching series right now called Better to Give. And I explained this last week, I'll explain it again briefly. So a couple times a year, we do a series that's part of a bigger series called Practicing Faith. And basically what that means is a couple times a year, we teach on a spiritual practice. And then as a church throughout the week, we encourage you to do your homework. Or so we're all doing something together. That's the whole idea. So we've taught on, for instance, reading the Bible, the spiritual discipline or spiritual practice of reading the Bible. And then during the week, we give everybody some stuff to do to read the Bible. We've done that for prayer. We've done it for Sabbath keeping. So now we're doing it for giving, okay? And so last week, we gave everybody $5. I think that we have more. No, we do not have more. Okay, so we gave most people $5. If you didn't get your $5, you can reach out to us. We still have some envelopes at our house, actually. But the idea is just to spur you on. Like, what could you do with $5? It seems like a little, but sometimes you can do a lot. And so I wanted to read you guys a couple stories that we got. So at that website, right, you can go and you can either upload a video of telling me about your story, or you can just go write it in. So we've had 4 people write in stories. Okay, can I read them to you? Yeah, okay. So I was in Aldi's grocery store, and almost immediately upon entering, I saw a slightly older gentleman, that's like my age, who had just a few items in his hands. He seemed to be carefully selecting one more item from the muffins options. His appearance was worn, and the items he had were minimal, only which he could hold in his arms. I thought of the $5 gift from City Light, but it was in my car. So I ran back to my car and grabbed it. I was quick to grab what I needed, he was quick to grab what I needed and check out. So I saw that he was checking out with a handful of items. So I checked out at the self-checkout next to him, and I said, "Can I give you this card?" I felt he was someone that could use $5. He was very kind in accepting it, although I had not told him what was in it. It was a card from City Light Church, and they were asked to share with someone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a small blessing with someone else. Awesome. Super easy, and also willing to overcome a small obstacle of it not being on you. Okay, one person treated my friend to a coffee because she was having a rough week. Another one of my doctors is having a rough week, so I bought a fun gift for her. Love it. We were gifted a free meal at Mad Max, and our waitress was amazing. We talked with her, and she had graduated from University of Delaware, but was working for a year to save money to go to grad school. We gave her the $5 from City Light plus another $30 and told her about radical generosity and our church's challenge. We asked her what she would do with it, and she said, "It'll go right into my savings account." Hopefully she will come to church. She is one step closer to grad school, and awesome. They said we want to give her more next time. Awesome. So it just starts conversations. It just starts us thinking, right? That's the whole point. The whole point isn't that this is a lot of money. The whole point is it gets us thinking. Last week's point was radical generosity. Jesus teaches radical generosity to those who are in need. And we're going off of Jesus's quote. He said it's better to give than to receive. That's the whole concept behind it. So we're going to talk about something else different today. And we're going to have another challenge for this week. But continue the $5 challenge, because I bet not everybody gave their $5 away yet, including me. So I was out of town most of the week, and I felt like I didn't want to, I want to give it away locally. So give away your $5. Tell us the stories. If you've already given it away, tell us the stories. So it is better to give than to receive. And I want to start today by asking the question, why? Why is it better to give than to receive? Why did Jesus say that to us? And so let me tell you a story that I think is a metaphor for maybe why. When I was younger, I used to be fascinated with driving, and I could not wait till I was 16, could not wait till I could drive, and I would sit on my dad's lawnmower, riding lawnmower before I was old enough to even drive that, and I would literally sit in the garage and pretend to drive the lawnmower, which shows you that I didn't have much to do as a kid, okay? So I would just sit there and pretend to drive the lawnmower. Then one day, we were all, as a family, cleaning out our big van. And some of you have heard this before, but we lived on a hill, so the van was always parked like this, like a really steep hill that then went into the neighbor's yard and down, like forever, would go down forever till it hit the creek, like a mile away. The whole neighborhood's built like that. So sitting in the van, and I wasn't really cleaning. Other people were cleaning. My brother's in there vacuuming it. My dad's outside doing something on the outside of the car. And I'm pretending to drive, right? Like that is what I'm doing. It's what I want to do. So I'm moving the steering wheel, it doesn't move very well. And I'm like, honking the horn. And then I put the shifter in neutral. Yeah. And like, I don't know if you can do that with cars anymore, but now you can, or then you could. And so like immediately started to roll. And my brother, who's 6 years older than me and, had this potential moment to be a hero, jumped out of the van. So he was in the van with me, right? And he was like, I'm out. So he jumps out of the van, leaving me alone. So I was probably like 8 or 9, right? 10? Yeah. 6 or 7? I was little. Jeez. Why are you letting me drive at that age? And I'll never live it down. If my brother was here today, he hates this story because I ran over his bike. And he claims my parents never bought him another one. So it's kind of mean, but it isn't true. It's not true, right? But he's very salty about it. So my dad there's 3 times I remember my dad being a hero in my life, like physically, like he's a hero in my life also, like on a much grander scale, but like 3 times where I felt like he acted like a hero. One was during the fire. Remember that? We'll tell that story someday. So my dad jumps into the van, right? Or somehow onto it, opens the door, jumps in before we even went into the street and slams the emergency brake on, like hanging from the door. It was so cool. And it was the perfect thing because it was like so scary that they didn't even punish me, because there was one of those times where they're like, the scariness was punishment enough. Like, I love that. It's a great line, right? I didn't get in trouble, so which is great. Story of my childhood, right, Dad? So I think that that's a great analogy for money. Like with money comes tons of power that we might not be ready for. And so I was not ready for the power. Now I could get in that car and I could handle if I accidentally put it in neutral. I would know what to do, right? That car would not be too much power for me. But at that age, it was too much power for me. And I think that part of why Jesus says it's better to give than to receive is he recognizes that inherently in money is the potential for so much power that we couldn't handle it, okay? Let's think about this a different way. What I want to say today is that God loves us too much to let us love money. What he wants for you and I is to have a life that is full of meaning, that is full of purpose, that is full of love, that is full of kindness, that is free from entrapment, ensnarement, or addiction to anything. He wants us to be free, to be people of love and generosity and giving. And so he loves us too much to let us love money, because he knows if we love money, we're going to be ensnared to money, and it's going to be too much for us to handle. Like the car was too much for me to handle. Let me ask you if you feel this at all, right, in your life. Have you ever gotten into a fight with anyone over money? Have you ever gotten into a fight in your marriage? No, you don't have to raise your hands. Have you ever gotten into a fight in your marriage over money? Like, how much to spend on a certain thing or not to spend on a certain thing? Have you ever lost sleep over money? Have you ever been stressed about money and so it's impacted your health? Have you ever bought something you regretted or felt guilty about something after you bought it? Right? Like money has this way of being more than just like this thing you use to buy stuff with. Like, have you ever, okay, maybe not a panic attack, but have you ever had severe anxiety about money? No, I have. Like that moment when you realize that, you thought you deposited that check, but you didn't. And then you look at your bank account and you have like 5 of those withdrawal fees in a row. And you're like in your late 30s and you're like, I should be more of an adult. Like, I don't think anyone else my age this seems like a, no offense, but this seems like a 20-year-old mistake, right? Like I have a family now, I have a mortgage. I can't even keep up with my bank account. That literally is a true story. And so I went to the bank and I begged. I said, look, I've been a customer for 20 years. Can you reduce some of these fees? This is ridiculous. You're just hitting me for the same sin over and over again. Jesus would never do that. So they cut it in half. I thought that was pretty nice. Right? Like money causes us kind of more strife and more angst and more frustration and more temptation. Like, have you ever been tempted to spend money you didn't have? Anybody ever been tempted? Sorry, I didn't mean to look at you right when I said that. Oh, that was so awkward. Yeah. Huh? Well, have you? Right? You got to be careful when you say stuff like that. You don't land on somebody. I just like zeroed in. My bad. Have you ever been tempted to spend more? Have you ever done that? Have you ever spent more? Have you ever spent more and then regretted it? Right? Like, there's all this potential. And so what I want to do is say, like, Jesus loves us more than we love ourselves a lot of times. And so this is why I believe he talks about money so much. Do you remember last week, if you came last week, how many scriptures we talked about It's amazing how often Jesus talks about money. We're going to show even more today. And what I want to do today is I want to look at one specific passage in 1 Timothy. If you're not familiar, 1 Timothy is a book written from Paul. Okay, so Paul was like Apostle Paul. He planted a bunch of the first churches. He wrote a bunch of the New Testament, and he wrote 2 letters to Timothy, who was this young guy, probably late teens, who he discipled, trained up, equipped, and left in charge of a church. And so he would write Timothy these letters to help him as a leader. And I want to just read a portion at the beginning of the teaching, then we're going to talk, and then we're going to read the end of it at the end of the teaching. So here's how it starts. He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. And I want you to just think about that word contentment. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And I want to talk about contentment, not the whole teaching, but just for a second. Contentment is not something that you hear about in America. And if you're someone who's traveled and worked in other cultures where they are used to living with less, contentment is more of a thing. You'll hear it from people who travel overseas and work with people in poorer countries. And they'll talk about how the people there are so generous and willing to give, and they just seem happy, and they look at what they have. And like this happened to us when we went to Belize. The people in Belize, I told this story last week, but when we went to Belize, the people there had very little, but they were so content. They weren't like worried about whether their TV was big enough for Super Bowl Sunday. You know, they weren't stressed about that. They were just content with what they had. And he's telling us, like, look, it's this drive to never have enough that is going to mess up your heart. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. How true is this? Think about this, and this is what I'd like us to start to get. Like when we think about how God views money, all the money that you and I have is His. That is the biblical view of money. Is not that you own money, and I know you've worked for it, and I've worked for it too, and it's really hard for us to disconnect that. Just because you worked and got money in return doesn't mean that's your money from a biblical point of view. This is an Old Testament passage that I'm about to show you, and this is back when King David was building the first temple, and he amasses all this wealth from his own personal stockpile and from everyone in Israel to build this temple, and he says, who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Imagine you have been blessed with a job that makes, whatever, $500,000 a year. You're making good money, and you give money to somebody. You bless somebody in need. You make a big donation to 1-in-7B, and your prayer is, who am I that I should be able to be so generous? Do you see the humility in that? Everything comes from you. All of this money, God, that ended up in my bank account came from you. And we have given you only what comes from your hand. We have given you only what comes from your hand. Think about that. The money I'm giving to you is just what God has given to me. I'm just passing it on. If somebody gives me money and is like, hey, I wanted to give Josh some money today, but I didn't see him at church, so here's $50 I owe Josh. And then I take that money and I go give it to Josh. Am I giving Josh my money? No, I'm just passing it on. Do I own that money? Is that my money? Why wouldn't it be weird if I was like, oh man, this is so hard to give to Josh. Oh, I am so generous. Right? That's a crazy concept to think about your money as God's money that you're stewarding as opposed to your money, and you're like, well, God asks me to give 10%. Oh. You can flip that and be like, he only asked for 10% back. Well, that's not a bad deal. If I gave you $1 million and I was like, hey, you only have to give me 10% back, you'd be like, done. I have no problem with 10%. That is a nice low number. It's interesting how we think about it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Again, this is just like the biblical view of money is really radical, isn't it? Like if I just have my needs met, I will be content. Now listen, here's where he starts to warn us. Remember, God loves us too much to let us love money. Those who want to get rich, listen to what happens. They fall into temptation. Those who want to get rich, they want money for money's sake, fall into temptation and a trap. Money can be a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Sounds good, doesn't it? Is that written like on any bank statements that you get from your bank? Like, be careful with this. Like there's warning statements on like food and well, I don't know. I don't honestly know what prop, whatever it is from California, but that's written on literally anything you buy, it can give you cancer. Have you noticed that? Like you buy a lawnmower, it can give you cancer. You buy toothpicks, they can give you cancer. Like prop, whatever from California, they're really scared of cancer. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about that. But this is a warning. They don't put it on money. They don't print this on money. They don't print it on your bank account. They don't print it on your statement. Like, hey, warning, too much of this and you could cause ruin and destruction in your life. Like that's a pretty intense, like I don't think it's like, oh, I don't know if they translated this correctly. I don't know if we interpret this Greek. Like this is pretty plain. If you want to get rich, be careful because it's a trap and it can bring ruin to your life. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of what? Evil. The love of money. Now, a lot of people quote this wrong and they're like, money is the root of, no. The love of money, that passion to be rich above all else, to pursue money for money's sake, to seek in money your refuge, your safety, your identity, your sense of purpose, for money to become your what? Your God. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have even wandered away from Jesus. And we see that, don't we? We see that in stories that Jesus is telling where people come to him and they're unwilling to part with their money. And so God loves us too much to let us love money. And he's saying, look, if you love money, it can cause ruin and destruction in your life. So let's talk about what can it ruin? What can it ruin in your life if you love money? Not money itself, we're on the same page, right? But if you love money, and you're the only one who can decide if you love money. But let's just think about it a little bit. Like, am I needing money more than I should? Am I wanting money more than I should? Am I holding on to money more than I should? So first of all, it can ruin your integrity. It can tempt you to be dishonest. How many of you have ever been tempted to cheat some system somewhere, right? Or some person, or to be less than perfectly honest about something with someone to get a little bit more money or to save a little bit more money? So I forgot to ask Mandy permission to tell this story, but I'm going to anyway. So recently, I forgot to tithe. All right, so Mandy and I practice what we believe is the biblical principle of tithing, which is we give 10% of our money to the church, and the way we do it is every month. Some people do it quarterly, some people do it annually. Doesn't really matter. So we give it monthly, and I've never set it up as a recurring payment, which I would love for all of you to do, but I've never done that because I like the feeling of like doing it. Like every month I give it, and I want to feel it, and I want to know I'm giving it, and I say a little prayer. Okay. So in the fall, I was coaching this soccer team, and it took over my life, and I did not remember to tithe twice. So that's a significant amount of money. And I don't know, like maybe you're better at money than I'm just being really honest here. If I don't put money somewhere, it disappears from my bank. I don't know what happens. It's like, it's magic. It's like poof, it's gone. And then you look back, you're like, what did we buy? I don't know, but it's gone. So it wasn't like when I realized it in my bank account, oh, there's my tithe money sitting there untouched. No, we spent it. Which, by the way, is why you're supposed to tithe first. First fruits, biblically, you give it first so you can't accidentally spend it on who knows what. And so then I had this temptation, like a very visceral temptation to not tell anybody, specifically Mandy, right? Because I know Mandy, I know what she's going to say. We have to pay God back. I know it. I don't even have to ask her. I could hear her saying it. I'm surprised she didn't like walk out from like the bedroom and be like, I sense it, But I was like starting to have a theological debate, right? Like, can you really, like, is that really a thing? Like, God's so full of grace. Like, he understands it was an honest mistake. Like, and I'm going to be really honest with you right now. I don't know. And well, here, all right, start texting. I know you're going to text me. He's already got his phone out. Yep. Start texting me now. I know that, but I don't know for sure that you have to pay God back. Okay, I'm just going to say that. I don't know that if you came to me seeking counsel, and I would probably say, hey, just start now. But I stand up on stage and tell people to tithe. So there's like a higher responsibility there. And also I knew my heart. And my heart wasn't like, oh, I'm so repentant. My heart was like, I hope I get away with this. And so I needed to figure out a way to tithe. And so we worked into our budget a way to pay God back over the next 6 months. Doesn't that sound weird? Pay God back. I know you might disagree with it. Don't get stuck in the weeds of that part of the story. I'm just showing you it can ruin your integrity. It can ruin, like, I'm not saying I have lots of integrity, but I have some, right? And like in that moment, like that's a very basic thing for our faith that we've done for 25 years now, every month, no matter how much we make or didn't make. And I was like, let me find a loophole. I want to get out of this. Like money, other things don't do that to me. Money has this weird power. Like if I could just get a little, because then I get a little more money. I can get a little more money. I can have a little bit more money. As if money does much. Like, okay, it can ruin your generosity. Have you ever noticed that when you get more money, you always say this, when I get more money, I will what? I'll be more generous. That is a lie, right? We just call that a lie. When you get more money, you will be exactly as generous as you were with the less money. That's why God makes tithing, just by the way, a percentage, because it's the same. And you don't have to build up to it or like postpone it, right? If you postpone your generosity until you get a raise, you'll find something to spend that money on that isn't generous. So like, it can ruin your generosity. As you love money, the more you feel like you want to do this and do this. Recently, someone gave us a $150 gift card to our favorite restaurant, Mikimoto's. And we went the other night, finally, and it was glorious. We got so much sushi, they brought it on a boat. I always want to order enough that they bring the boat out. You know what I'm talking about? Because you feel so special. It might look a little ridiculous when it's only two of you and they bring the boat out, but I feel I'm in for it, right? So they bring the boat out. It's got sushi everywhere. We barely finished it. It was rough. I was a little worried halfway through. And the lady came out and we paid with the what's it called? Gift card. And it was like $35 extra. And so old me, this is a good story. I told a bad story about me. I'm gonna tell a good story about me, okay? Just wanna even the balance out, all right? So old me would have been like, that's awesome, we're keeping it for next time. And just tipped her a normal tip, right? From my bank account. And I would have thought, oh, we got to go out for only this little bit amount. But my instincts are changing. And I call it hanging out with Mandy, okay? I mean, Jesus, I call it hanging out with Jesus, right? So I was like, oh, let's just give her the whole thing. Let's just give her the whole thing. And Mandy was like, I was already gonna force you to do that, basically. So she comes, I give her the gift card, and I was like, can you tip on that? She's like, yeah. I was like, okay, just keep it. She was like, did you look at how much it is? I was like, yeah. It's like a 35, 40% tip. I was like, yeah, just keep it. We want to bless you. And then we invited her to church. High five. Okay. Is she here? Wouldn't that be amazing if she was here, but she's not. Okay. It can ruin your generosity. It can ruin your purpose. You have a purpose in life. You have meaning in life that's about more than money. So Jesus tells some stories where he talks about how people forget about the meaning of life. He tells us one story where this guy has this great harvest, and he's like, what am I gonna do? I know what I'll do. I'll knock down all my barns, I'll build bigger ones, and I'll fill them with all my surplus. And then at the end of the story, Jesus is like, you spent all that money doing that, and now you're gonna die. You missed all this chance in life to live. You forgot what life was about. You forgot life was about loving God and loving others. You made it all about just protecting your assets. And he's like, you foolish man, don't you know that your life will be demanded of you tonight? See, if you get too focused on money, if you love money, it can ruin your purpose. That's the story right there. Skipping through it. It also can ruin your dependence on God. There's only one thing in the Bible that Jesus says competes with him as God in our hearts, and that's money. He doesn't say like lust. He doesn't say selfishness. He says you cannot serve two masters. You will either love the one and despise the other, or you'll despise the one and love the other. You cannot serve both God and money. It can ruin your dependence on God because you can build this false sense of security where the more money I have, the safer I feel, the more secure I feel, the more confident I feel. And really all of that is an illusion. Anyone who's ever lost a job probably has learned that lesson, right? But money it promises to do a lot of what God does for us, but it can't deliver, okay? So it ruins our faith. God loves us too much to let us love money. So the first part of that part in Timothy says, be careful with money. If you push too hard after it, it's a trap. It can end up bringing ruin and destruction. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It can bring ruin and destruction into your life. So why does Jesus say it's better to give than to receive? Because he loves us. Because he doesn't want the love of money to seep in. And maybe as you've been listening to this and reading these verses, maybe you've been seeing some points in your life where, hey, maybe I am leaning too heavily on money. Maybe I am thinking too much about money. Maybe I am committing too much of my time towards making money. I have seen myself compromising integrity. I do think sometimes I feel more peaceful in life the more money I have, and it's not as connected to who God is in my life. Maybe you're seeing some of those things. And so, what's the answer? So I'm going to give you one possible answer. If you keep reading that verse, he says this: command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth. We've talked about that, which is uncertain, but put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Okay, we're not going to go into that, but that's pretty cool. Command them, and I would say that most of us who live in America would fall under the standard of quote unquote rich. I know some of us have more than others, but like a lot of us here have more than most of the world. Command them to do good. Here's the cure, or a cure. There's probably a couple, but here's a way to break the love of money, to break up with money in your life, okay? Command them to do good and be rich in what? Good deeds. And be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Because God loves you too much to let you love money, because he wants you to have the life that is truly life. The life that you will find when you break yourself free from the love of money and instead live a life of generosity. Live a life where your hands are open. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, be generous and willing to share. So the second thing I would say, last week we talked about a radical generosity to those in need. And today I'd like to say a radical generosity with our lives. Think about this. And maybe go back and read this during the week. Worship team, you guys can come up. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. It's a lifestyle. It's more than just being willing to give to those who are in need. It's a lifestyle of generosity. It's having open homes, open hearts. It's having open schedules for people who are in need, but also for people in the church. The Bible talks about it, for your neighbors. Like, we're supposed to be people who live generously. And I know this is going to make Mandy upset with me, but the last thing I want to say is I've learned a lot about this from Mandy. Mandy has this gift, and not everybody has this gift, but Mandy has this gift of a generous lifestyle, not just being generous with money. And this is what I want you to think about this week. I want you to think about having a generous lifestyle where you're open with your time and your abilities. What are you good at? What can you give away to other people? And so, like, recently we had the young adult group come over to our house for dinner. And this is what, like, so first of all, Mandy's like, we need to have them at our house. And I'm like, listen, we have a lot of things at our house. Why don't we have it somewhere else? And she's like, no, we need to open our house. And I was like, okay, but let's just order pizza. She's like, no, they need a home-cooked meal. I'm like, really, they don't need a home-cooked meal? And she's like, no, I can't have them come to my house and me not make a home-cooked meal. Then they offered to bring food. She's like, no, they can't bring food. They're coming, right? And then after the meet, she's hating this so much. Leah, she hates this. So after the thing's over, like, we're this 2.5-hour meeting. It was a great time, great discussion. It's winding down, and Mandy gets up and leaves the discussion. I'm like, I wonder what she's doing. So she's in there making individual bags, because we had leftover pasta and salad, for every single person in the meeting. She put pasta in a bag and wrote their name on it, and put salad in a bag and wrote her name, for every single person who came. And it's just like, I would never think of that or do it. Even if I thought of it, I'd be like, that's a lot of work. You know, get your own bags. If I thought of it, there's just like people who just, Jesus flows out of them in generosity. So you might be that person who, like, you're hearing this teaching, you're like, check, I got it. Great, I'm happy for you. But if you're like me, this is something that you can work on. So here's your weekly challenge. I want you to look for one way to give your life away in a practical way. Take some time. Guys, come on up. We're not going to have a lot of time. Come on up. Take some time or some ability, like if you're good at working on websites, help somebody with a website for free. If you're good at chopping wood, City Light website might need some help. If you're good at, I don't know, whatever skill you are, like, use a skill, right? Like, give your time, talent, and treasure. Give away a talent. Give away something that you have that you think someone else might use that you don't, whatever. I'm just saying, be creative. Think of one way where you can specifically be generous that's not money, okay? So you've got your $5 challenge, complete that. This week is do something generous without money. Does that make sense? Do something generous with your life. It could be inviting someone over for dinner. There's limitless things that you could do. But I challenge you, what if everyone in our church gave away their life in one small way this week. Wouldn't that be a good thing for our church? You can do it for people in the church. You can do it for people at work, in your neighborhood. See, what's cool is our church is already really good at this. So this is like taking a class from an A to an A+. Like, we are good at this already. Let's continue to ask the Lord, how can we be more generous? How can we pour out our hearts and our lives? Okay.